to get to the other side where those thoughts are a bit nicer, we can't push them away because they're going to come at us in different shapes and forms late at night, when you're driving, when you're not, expecting it, when someone cuts you off in traffic. It all then builds up.
Welcome back. We are in part 2 of our 2-part series with the brilliant Nicole Vignola. She's a neuroscientist, author, and speaker who specializes in rewiring the brain to just make life better. But seriously, decision-making, resilience, less stress, living with more peace, and making the long-lasting changes that we want to make in life. We're talking about how to break free from procrastination, how to de-stress, what will really help us throughout the day, how do we break our bad habits, things that once we understand this, once we know how our brain needs us to care for it and what is going on in our brains can completely change our lives. Again, this is part 2 of 2, so we're going to jump in right in the middle. And now, without further ado, here's part 2 with Nicole. Basically, we want to think about external versus internal focus and inputs. Can you break that down a little bit more?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that I talk about, and I'm talking about this in my next book as well. Yes, I'm writing another one.
Oh,
very exciting.
congrats.
Yeah, thank you. Is that I don't think we spend enough time in our own thoughts with ourselves. Yeah. And so what happens is at nighttime, those thoughts all come flooding in just before bed. And what's happening in the brain on a neuroscientific level is that we've got the default mode network and we've got the central executive network. So those two networks are your two most prominent networks in the brain, and they work in tandem. What that means is that the central executive network is responsible for external thinking, being on your phone, us having this conversation, etc. Default mode network is your default mode type thinking. So when you're idling, maybe you're driving, maybe you're washing the dishes, maybe you're lying in bed, and that internal dialogue comes from that default mode network. Creativity also comes from that place. And it's the reason why it's hard to be creative if you're, sending an email. It's because those two networks work in tandem. And so my theory, and I'm looking at the literature right now, is that what tends to happen is that in that default mode network, it's a little bit like a garden. If you don't spend time in it and you push it away because you don't want to be there, the weeds are going to overgrow. The plants are going to be dying, and the grass is going to be unkept. And so the more time we spend in this place and we sift out the thoughts and we become friends with ourselves and we gain self-trust, we start pulling the weeds, we start planting flowers, and we start creating a place that we don't mind being in. Because a lot of the time we use social media and other distractions to keep us from going to that place, because most people don't want to sit with their own thoughts.
Because thoughts can sometimes be relatively scary if you're avoiding something. There's an app that I'm building. I've partnered with psychologists and counselors, and we have breath work and reflections in it, body scans, guided journals to help de-stressing. So many things to help people get into their own brains, to get internal, to process their feelings, to feel better, to de-stress as just a quick break from social media. Because one of the things I'm going to say is, hey, you're probably on social media 2 hours a day. Yeah. What if you just give this app 10 minutes? Because you can process your feelings and de-stress and feel better. Because social is so, can I use the word damaging? We'll see how you feel about it. One of your quotes that I wrote down for this is, the problem is that when we use social media during our work breaks as a form of distraction, thinking that we're giving our brains a break, our energy resources are in fact still being allocated to something that is mentally taxing, getting a kick from doom scrolling.
That's exactly it.
Even if we can get 10 minutes a day less doom scrolling, imagine what that can do to women's brains and their happiness.
Totally. Because, I think there's so many wonderful aspects of social media, and I do highlight those things, but it's how you use it, right? The problem is that it's like a slot machine at the tip of your fingertips. And so it's natural that you would lean towards that. And it's kind of a feat to having a good relationship with it. And I do think that you can, and there are days where I doom scroll and I have a great time. I was at the hospital yesterday and I was in a hole and I was having a great time. But different times, different situations. And so yeah, I agree that it's about finding a way to managing that correctly. And yes, to be able to spend time in that, like you said, the body check, the default mode network, that awareness to just create some space and get to know yourself, if for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the ability to process how we're feeling, because if we get stressed or we get sad and the first thing that happens is our thumb starts twitching and we open up TikTok or we open up Instagram without checking in on ourselves and taking care of ourselves, we're just taxing our brain more. And we are probably at a high degree of risk of having comparison and imposter syndrome pop up. Because,
making it worse. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever our triggers are, Instagram and TikTok are going to serve us our triggers.
Yes, exactly. And, I always say, if you're having these thoughts, and I know that this is quite a scary, maybe concept to take on board, but I always invite you to sit with them, because the only way is through. And I spoke about this in Rewire. To get to the other side where those thoughts are a bit nicer, we can't push them away, because they're going to come at us in different shapes and forms late at night, when you're driving, when you're not, expecting it, when someone cuts you off in traffic. It all then builds up and it comes out at the time where you least expect it. And so why not cultivate these times like your app, where you can actually spend time sifting through these thoughts and feelings and becoming aware of them and managing them correctly, so that they don't, slap you when you least expect it, because they will.
It doesn't take an hour. It can take 10 minutes.
Well,
and
exactly.
I think there's an idea, if I'm going to take care of myself and my brain and my emotions and my health in this way, it's going to be overwhelming. But really, these are tiny micro things that we can do during the day. I want to talk to you about procrastination, because so many people deal with procrastination. How can we train our brains to stop procrastinating?
Well, firstly, procrastination, we need to understand where it's coming from. A couple of things. Could be fear of success, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of being seen. I procrastinate when I have to record my YouTube videos, and it's because I'm afraid that people are going to not like them, or it's going to do rubbish, or the algorithm's not going to favor. It's all these kind of thoughts. And so understanding where it comes from means that then you're better equipped at being able to overcome it. So, I'll have a conversation with myself, you've got to do it regardless, or whatever that may be. Or it could be that I've actually just done, ironically, a YouTube video on procrastination. The other part is that it could be that you have quite literally trained your brain to favor the immediate rewards. So why would you want to do the hard thing if you could just do the easy thing, which is scrolling? And then you get yourself into such a hole that you end up working in a deadline-induced panic, because now you've run out of time. And that's because you've essentially given your resources to the easy route, the quick fixes. And so it's about training our brain to understand that there's a long-term reward in putting in the effort. So, there's a couple of sides to that coin. So, and then the last thing is, procrastination can also come from stress. You're so stressed that it feels overwhelming. And one of the tools for that is to break it down into really small, manageable chunks. I mean, I sometimes even just I'll write it on my to-do list, send the email, which would take me like 1 minute to do, and I'll tick it off. I'm like, okay, we did that. And, baby steps where I just break everything down into really small, manageable tasks, so that it doesn't seem so scary.
And essentially, when you're writing down a list and you're checking it off, you can celebrate each small win.
Exactly.
That's a little bit of dopamine there.
Yeah, exactly. Why
If you
not?
talk about real dopamine versus fake dopamine, I'd love for you to break that down. One of your quotes that I love is, dopamine doesn't care about your happiness. Dopamine wants more.
Yes. So I'll just clarify the real dopamine and fake dopamine, because it's a metaphor. All dopamine is dopamine in the brain. And so I had some scientists sort of eat me alive on the internet because of that one. And interestingly enough, the trend kicked off, and a year later they were using it as well. Anyway, so we can get our dopamine from things that require effort, like, running, exercise, music, doing the goal, doing the to-do list. Or you could go for the easy route, which is scrolling, binge eating, the snacking, binge watching Netflix. And it's about making sure that there's a balance there, ideally in more favor of putting in the effort for the reward. The underlying rule for dopamine is that there needs to be an effort in the attainment of the reward. If it's too easy, what happens is dopamine spikes and then it drops very quickly. And then the problem is that there's a refractory period, meaning that there needs to be a little bit of time before dopamine stores replenish. And if you try and get another dopamine hit within that time frame, you're going to need more dopamine to feel just as good.
So that's why doom scrolling makes us feel so bad.
Exactly. And that's why at the end of the day, you're just kind of chasing, and you're like in a little bit kind of like, I'm not getting any satisfaction from this. Or you're checking your phone more and more progressively through the day. So by 7 o'clock, you're checking it every 5 minutes.
And you want some chocolate.
And.
Dopamine wants more. So how can we pace ourselves to make sure we're optimizing our dopamine and we aren't depleting it on, cheap fake dopamine during the day?
Yeah, so this is where your app is going to be perfect because unfortunately, unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you like to look at it, I've got a growth mindset. So for me, it's fortunately, it's sitting in that boredom and discomfort of wanting to go for more. That's when dopamine starts to rebalance itself. And you have to kind of sit within that boredom to be able to rebalance it out so that you're not on this reward seeking behavioral type chase where you just constantly want more. And so what that looks like is I want more chocolate. That comes in the form of pain because it wants more, and you have to sit with that discomfort where you go, okay, I'm going to wait 10 minutes. If I still want the chocolate, then I'm just going to have it. Otherwise, it's only because it's there. And it's the reason why eating slowly is so helpful with not overeating, because it's like you just want more, more, more. But if you actually wait a little bit, you start to realize that actually you're probably not as hungry as you thought you were.
Fascinating. Okay, so the refractory period. Say you open up TikTok, you get a huge spike of dopamine because that's what the brain does. But then the refractory period happens and you need to wait until your body needs to adjust. Is there a normal amount of time? Is it 5 minutes? Is it an hour?
Hard to say because we're all wired differently. We all have different ways that we might release dopamine. We've got different genetic components as well. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, I have a COMT mutation. What that means is that I don't have enough enzymes in my brain to break down dopamine once it has been released from the synaptic vesicle. So I personally get overstimulated very quickly from sounds or social media. And so someone like me might need a little bit more time between, hits of dopamine, if you will, versus maybe somebody that has a COMT mutation the other way, meaning that they've got too many enzymes that break down dopamine. So it's all very not complicated, but I would say that this is where self-awareness comes in, and where do you draw the line for yourself? Because there's no real formula, if you will, which makes it tough, but it also means that it teaches us to take control over our own autonomy. That was a
Absolutely.
mouthful.
And every human body is so distinct and different. Just knowing that we could have something in our brain that affects the enzymes and that affects how we're getting overwhelmed by sounds. I mean, the more we're learning about our brain, it's endlessly fascinating. For you as an expert, as you dove into this book, I'm sure you discovered things that surprised you or changed you as a fellow author. I'd love to hear about what this process looked like for you. What was the change? And is there a bit of research that really surprised you that you didn't know going into it?
The research side of things, not so much, because I was really doing a lot of public speaking. So I was really talking about a lot of this. I would imagine that with this next book, there's going to be a lot of aha moments because I'm sort of overhauling my entire body of research that's sitting in my brain. But one thing, this is a bit nuanced and personal, but what I really learned was I think taking a little bit more control over the campaign and the book and knowing what I wanted a little bit more. Because I think I put a lot of trust in the publishers, which is natural. It was Penguin Random House, and of course, I wouldn't have known that without going through it. But I think for this next book, I want different things for it because I think ultimately nobody's going to know me and the book and my audience better than me. And I think that's all. Is I kind of not that I wish I'd done things differently because I wouldn't have known any different. You don't know what you don't know, right? But I think what I've learned is that I can steer the boat myself a little bit more. Does that
I
make
love
sense?
that. Absolutely. A little experience
Yeah.
and getting your reps in and a lot more confident going into the next one.
And I love that you said that because that's exactly what I talk about in Rewire is that you gain confidence by going to places where you don't have any and then gaining the evidence that you can. And so, we gain confidence through experiences. We call it experience dependent plasticity. And if you haven't experienced something, then you don't know how, you're not equipped to deal with it. And a classic one is a breakup. The first terrible one is awful, but hopefully they get better after that. And generally speaking, they should because now you know what it's like. I was sort of really fancied this guy back in America and he sort of fumbled me and it stung for about 3 days. And I was like, okay, over it now. Because I have experience with these things. It's not like when I was in my teens and 20s where, that would have been way more painful because I didn't understand the ingredients of what that was. Whereas now I'm like, okay, well, that kind of stung a little bit. Moving on.
Yeah. When we're younger, it's the end of the world.
Yeah, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And it's the same with the book, is that now I have a better understanding about how I want this book to look and go, etc. So yeah.
Love it. If someone's listening and they would like to do just 3 small brain boosting changes in their
Mm.
lives, I'm sure it's hard to pick 3 to start with, but what could you give us?
Okay, so small wins. Start congratulating yourself for those because those are going to be the small steps you need to make huge changes. And it will change the way you see yourself, the way you see the world, the way you just approach your ability to make changes. So that's number one. Celebrate the
Mhm.
small wins. Number two is hydrate correctly, effectively, consistently, however you want to see it. But even a 2% dehydration in our
Mhm.
brain can cause temporary cognitive impairments, if you will. So it can impair your psychomotor activity, which is how quickly you react to things. And so making sure that you're hydrating throughout the day can be really helpful in just helping you feel a bit better. So sometimes people will be irritable or stressed or snappy or feel sad. And I'm like, when last did you have some water? Go and have a glass of water and they instantly feel better. Because sometimes that's what you're craving. And we
Mhm.
think it's
Makes perfect
chocolate,
sense.
or we think it's
Yeah.
a cookie, or we think it's scrolling, but it's just water.
Huh. Our
Yeah.
brains just need it. Okay,
Yeah.
final one.
Final one. Ooh, I think learning to sit with that discomfort
Mm.
when you're feeling a particular way is a really it's one of the hardest things that I think we can conquer. And this is why things like your app are so great because when you're feeling a particular way, instead of clutching at some kind of external relief, go in. Can you breathe through it? Can you sit through it? Can you just take a second so you're not constantly, automatically and habitually moving on to some kind of distraction?
Yeah, because as you've taught us, if we move on to distraction, we are training our brain to do that. We're training our brain that we can't deal with pain, we can't deal with discomfort. We need a
Exactly.
distraction. And the distraction that we're choosing, unfortunately, that has been designed so addictive, often makes us feel worse
Yes.
than when we're done. Okay, this has been absolutely fascinating. Are you ready for some fun questions?
Yes,
Okay.
I am.
First one, what about a TV series or a movie that you've enjoyed recently?
Oh, the first one that came to mind was The Sinner. Have you ever watched it?
No, tell me all
With
about it.
Jessica Biel.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it's like a thriller, psychological thriller. So she ends up murdering this guy on the beach and doesn't understand why. And then
Oh.
basically you uncover why. And I watched the whole thing, which is very unlike me. I don't really watch TV. I watched it in one sitting because I was
Oh, I
like, this is
love it.
so good.
I love a thriller, so I will
Yeah.
definitely check that one
The
out. That's
Sinner
great.
season 1. Yeah.
Okay,
So
season 1,
good.
got it. What about a book? Are you reading anything other than research right now?
I read a book a week. So yeah, mostly fiction. So
Mhm.
I don't really read self-help so much anymore. But what have I read recently that was good? Let me have a look at my bookshelf. Do you know what I really liked was Lessons in Chemistry.
I keep seeing it on social and thinking, "I need to read that because everyone loves it." You loved it.
Yeah, it was a really sweet, wonderful, easy read. I read it in 3 days because it was just
Nice.
so lovely and sad, but just so well written.
Okay,
Yeah,
again, I'll give that one a shot too.
yeah.
What about a product that made you tell a friend that she needed to get it?
Ooh, was this mop that when you put it in the little bucket thing, it like swivels around and dries up the mop very easy. Yeah, it's very random. I mean, this is what.
We love random. We discover the most wonderful random things that way. We love random.
Yeah, so it was a mop.
That's great. And then what about an app? Is there an app that you love?
I use Open a lot. So
Mm.
Open is an American-based breathwork and meditation app,
Mhm.
and they're great. So I use that pretty regularly.
Oh, I'll have to check them out.
Yes,
Okay.
they have curated music with James Blake,
Mhm.
who's a musician. He's become their
Yeah.
sort of head of sound, or what, I'm butchering it now, but they essentially collaborated with him to curate the music, which is just incredible.
Ooh, I love
Yeah.
that. Okay, I will give them a look. Now, are you allowed to give me a time frame for when the next book will be published? A season? Year?
Not sure yet, just
Okay.
because it's very early days. We're
Yeah.
hoping for, I think they said next year, September.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, I can't wait to have you back on. Tell
Yes.
everyone where they can find you.
So I'm on Nicole's Neuroscience on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, although my TikTok is a bit dire. I need to put a bit more effort into that. But uh, YouTube and Instagram are my two main sources. And the YouTube is great because I break down all of the things that people go through, from procrastination to breakups to everything that, we deal with as humans on a long form basis. So, yeah,
Yeah. And what I love about you, your amazing book, Rewire, your YouTube channel, everything you do, you break down neuroscience in a way that's easy to understand, that we
thank
can,
you.
as people who aren't neuroscientists, we can wrap our brains around this and go, okay, this makes sense. We
Yeah,
need to take care of the hardware and the software. So
yeah,
just from me, thank you for your work. It's been
thank
life-changing
you.
to me and so many others.
Oh, you're so incredibly kind. And thank you for saying that because it was my mission to make neuroscience digestible and less scary so that people can see that, we can make these changes and life isn't so scary.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
She was so amazing. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for investing in you. Thank you for investing in your mental health and your brain health and just the health of your entire body, your life. You are valuable. You're important. The things that God has placed in your hands are important. So, you taking care of yourself so you can do the things that He has called you to do, it matters. It matters that you take breaks during the day. It matters that we don't get in doom scrolling spirals. It matters that we don't let ourselves spiral out. We take care of ourselves so we can also take care of other people. Your life is so important for you, but for everyone else that you affect. So thank you for being a woman who's taken the gifts that God has placed inside of her and going for it. Thank you for investing in yourself. That's why you're here week after week. You're learning, you're growing, and you're building a healthier, stronger, more joyful life one step at a time. So let me remind you, you're stronger than you think, smarter than you give yourself credit for, and braver than you feel in the hard moments. And the best part is you are just getting started. So keep stepping up, keep showing up and loving well, because you can't break a woman who gets her strength from God. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Stronger, more. How great. What is going on in my voice? Which is Oh, go ahead. I'm putting the pieces together. I